Hey, good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you are. New day, new stream, yes, twice in a row. I know that's like groundbreaking for me. Still sick, still don't know how long I will manage to keep this up. Yesterday we didn't manage to go through the usual like 9 to 10 commanders that I used to do for Boros, but since I have a bit more time this and next week, that means we can just, take it at a slower pace and work our way maybe more diligently through these Simic commanders, as it is also the last two color combination we're going to talk about. For now, we can quickly recap. I'm going to move to the other screen. Or no, a quick word from the sponsor of this stream, myself. No, I don't know what I'm talking about. Tomorrow, for sure, gonna check out Slay the Spire 2. I've been playing Slay the Spire 1 recently, religiously, before going to bed. So, tomorrow you're surely gonna see like a Magic player tries Slay the Spire 2 for the first time type stream. I'm just so hyped for the game, and I genuinely think that if you like Magic, you will like Slay the Spire as well. At least there's like a 90% chance, in my opinion. So, tomorrow we'll take a break from the commanders and stream Slay the Spire 2. That doesn't mean nothing will be happening in the space of Magic. I might still be working on different projects. But yeah, the release day, I'm so hyped. I'm gonna for sure take some time to enjoy the game. Yesterday, we started with Karuga. Karuga, of course, being a companion, with a companion restriction of only having mana value 3 or greater cards in your deck. And pretty much, we asked ourselves the question, what can we do in turns 1 and 2 if every card in our deck has to technically cost 3 or more? Well, the usual suspects: Suspend, Foretell, Warp, Plot, Flashback, Evoke. Yeah, those kind of shenanigans. Next in line was Kian, Corrupted Memory. Super fun, at least to read and think about. To play, I'm sure she's also great. She's a 4-mana commander that, if her power is even, you can cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. If their power is odd, you can cast creature spells as though they had flash. And whenever you draw a card, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. So, one approach is to play cantrips that draw cards. Nice, to adjust the power as need be, right? We also talked about a bit about how these looting creatures that usually aren't that good unless you play a bunch of flashback stuff gain a lot more value because they are the cheapest rate to draw a card. Not to go card positive, but to draw a card that goes around. Next, we talked about payoffs. So, drawing cards is already great, of course, but there's some cards that specifically care about you drawing cards. The next step was, okay, well, obviously we're playing a lot of stuff instant speed. There is a subset of cards that says whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, do X. Here in Stinging Lionfish, it's tap or untap something. Wavebreak Hippocamp draws a card. We talked a little bit about blowouts, like what is the thing that you can do that is the most devastating to your opponents at instant speed that you usually don't get to do at instant speed. Cards like Frenzied Baloth that just mean or say combat damage can't be prevented makes it so protection is null and void, at least when blocking. Because protection, of course, a sub rule of protection is that damage from that certain color is prevented. But if combat damage can't be prevented and you're blocking something, well, your protection doesn't really do its job. Vigor, also huge blowout. 6 mana, super expensive, I know, but it was one of the examples that I could find. Let's say you're blocking with a bunch of creatures, then you flash in Vigor, and Vigor says if damage would be dealt to a creature you control other than Vigor, prevent that damage, and then put that many +1/+1 counters on the creature. We also talked about like what is just generically the best thing you can do that is usually sorcery speed, but at instant speed. For me, that's always going to be taking extra turns. I know that already puts you in a higher bracket if you're chaining extra turns together, but as someone who's a mono blue enjoyer, I can tell you that Time Warp is like, or like the ability to take extra turns in consecutive order like is so insanely strong. If you have 2 turns where you get full mana and the card draw, you're just so ahead. Then we also talked about how, like, yes, you're casting a lot of stuff instant speed, but you do need the mana. If you need mana during opponent's turns, Seedborn Muse is a game changer, unfortunately, but Wilderness Reclamation is not, and it even comes at a cheaper price tag. And mana also. A highlight for myself was Mana Maze. 2 mana, players can't play spells that share a color with the spell last played this turn. Now, usually, this means you hose someone who's trying to double spell. Of course, they play, let's say, their first white weenie creature. They are then barred from playing a second white weenie creature. In this deck specifically, where you can flash in stuff with Kian. Oh, by the way, I'm gonna move the images so we can... Yep, I already moved too far. Well, you'll have to deal with it. But, so, Kian, of course, we flash stuff in instant speed. Let's say you share a color with your opponent, and you flash in, whatever, your Kitsa Otter Ball Elite. If that player, during whose turn you flash in Kitsa, is a blue player, well, they can't cast any spells during their turn. And then lastly, a nice suggestion from a viewer, Teferi, Master of Time, is a Planeswalker that reads, you may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi on any player's turn, anytime you could cast an instant. And since the +1 is draw a card then discard a card, this is like perfect to adjust Kian's power and toughness. Then we talked about Crewfix, which I also moved past, but I guess I can go back. Wait. We talked about Crewfix. Crewfix, pretty simple. It's one of those Theros gods that is indestructible. It's an enchantment and only becomes a creature once your devotion is 7 to green and blue. No maximum hand size is pretty much a useless line of text unless in a very specific type of deck. And then the last line of text is what you're going to be building around. If unused mana would empty from your mana pool, that mana becomes colorless instead. So the goal here is really just to play the most or get the most mana you can possibly get. There's the usual ways of having double mana producers like Heartbeat of Spring or even triple like Nyxbloom Ancient, which is still at $15, which is crazy because, I mean, it's a 7 mana card. Vernal Bloom. There's also these cards that give you static amounts of mana, like Magus of Vineyard and the Vineyard of Eladamri, as well as Shizuko that just provide every player with mana, but you'll be the one that makes the most use of that mana. Omnath, Locus of Mana, comes to mind because he has a similar line of text. You don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end, and for each green mana that is unspent that you have, it gets +1/+1. Not sure if you necessarily need to play Omnath, it just came to mind. The big payoffs, you can kind of choose whatever you want. Hydra Krasis came to mind because it was a good card in Standard, but it's maybe not even that good in Commander anymore. Walking Ballista because you can kill someone pretty easily. The one I want to highlight, of course, is Mathemagics, because I am very excited for the new Strixhaven set, and it makes someone draw to the power of X, and you get to choose X. So, of course, like, this is the deck to get the highest values for Mathemagics and make someone, I don't know, draw 1,000 cards. I don't even know how high X would need to be, since the examples unfortunately stop at 2 to the power of 5, which is 32. Doubling Cube does exactly what it says, doubles your mana and your mana pool, which is very nice, because your mana pool doesn't empty. One nice suggestion from a viewer is, of course, like, we're collecting all that mana, we're trying to build up. and then someone removes Krufix, God of Horizons. So technically, your mana pool would empty end of turn. If you have the ability to cast things at instant speed, for example, by having Alchemist's Refuge or a High Fade Trickster, you could use all of that mana that you have in your mana pool, plus a green and a blue, because remember, all the mana in your mana pool is probably colorless, to just recast Krufix and get to keep all that mana. Because, yeah. Next, we talked about, oh my goodness, that's so many cards. First, Lonus Cryptozoologist, a 2 mana 1/2. Whenever a non-token creature enters, you investigate, and it taps to sacrifice any amount of clues. So you can look at target player's top X cards of their library and put a non-land permanent card with mana value X or less from among them onto the battlefield under your control. Now, creature ETBs mean you are going to play probably a bunch of Flicker. Cards like Displacer Kitten play double duty because they are a creature, so you get a clue on ETB, but they can also flicker stuff later on. Academy Manufacturer is of course very nice, because, your commander creates clues, why not make him create clues, food, and treasures? Especially treasures, of course, are insane. Whenever you create tokens and you can play green, Jaheira is your best friend, not just the best friend of the forest, because she makes it so your tokens can tap for green mana. There's a bunch of duplicates which don't have to cover everything, but also next to Jaheira, another card that is just generically good if you have a lot of artifacts lying around. And remember, clues are technically kind of hard to get rid of because you need to pay 2. Of course, your commander makes that a whole different story, but you can use the clues to improvise out some non-artifact spells and then still sacrifice them to Lonus later on, even during the same turn. There's a couple more angles that we found for this commander. First of all, this is an activated ability that has quite a steep activation cost. Not in the form of mana, but you need to get rid of a valuable resource. Whenever you have a very, very good activated ability, you can opt for cards like Illusionist's Braces, which copy an activated ability. Of course, the X value will still remain copied. So let's say you sacrifice 10 clues, then you get to do this twice and even choose new targets. Another thing that we talked about is how Lonus makes it so you always want to sacrifice as many clues as possible, up to a certain degree, because you don't know how deep you need to dig and how high the mana value of the card is that you want to cheat into your side of the playing field. So you could play cards like the dreaded Lantern of Insight, if you're a modern player, or Field of Dreams, which kind of do the same thing. They just make it so every player has the top card of their library revealed. This means maybe you see that one player has an insane card on top of their library, and you know exactly how many clues you need to sacrifice with Lonus to cast it. And then we did like what I always like to do. We did a quick check on like what are the best cards that I'm missing out because I'm only looking for hyper specific synergies. And there's a bunch of cards like Tamyo, which creates clues, super expensive though, unfortunately. And I also like forgot to talk about like the generic good artifact package and cards like Thought Monitor and Thoughtcast that have affinity for artifacts, which makes it so you can cast all of them for pretty cheap because Lonus makes it so they only cost 1 mana. There's a second copy of Lonus. It goes in a slightly different direction. It is Lonus the Genetic Expert. It's a 3 mana 1/2. It has evolved. That means whenever a stronger creature, higher power or higher toughness technically, comes into play on your side of the field, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. Whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Lonus, you investigate that many times. That means, again, you create clue tokens. This guy is very focused on clues. And whenever you sacrifice a clue token, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So, I mean, this is green, and you read +1/+1 counters. What do? You add cards like Hardened Scales. Instead of placing 1+1+1 counter, do 2. Instead of 3, do 4, and so on and so forth. There's a couple of cards that synergize quite nicely with this. Benevolent Hydra, same line of text, but you can move counters from the Hydra to somewhere else. Kami of Whispered Hopes, same line of text, but it also taps for mana depending on how strong it is. There's cards like Crystalline Crawler. 4 mana 1/1. It enters with a bunch of +1/+1 counters. You can remove a counter from it to add 1 mana, or tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on the creature. So that's obviously very nice and synergizes super well with the last line of text of Sacrifice a Clue to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Cryptic Trilobite is kind of similar. It's an X00, so it comes into play with X +1/+1 counters. You get to remove a counter to add 2 colorless mana, but you can only spend that mana to activate abilities, aka to crack your clues. It can also put counters on itself. There's a bunch more stuff that synergizes super well with +1/+1 counters, and we also included a couple of evolve cards, although I don't think that should be the theme of your deck. Maybe most notable, Sage of Hours, turns +1/+1 counters into extra turns. That's super cool. Loading Zone, Terra Symbiosis makes it so +1/+1 counters draw you cards. It's also very, very nice. And my personal highlight, a card from Urza's, I'm gonna say Legacy. I can't keep them apart. Destiny. Okay, from Urza's Destiny. It's a 4 mana 4/3 with Echo. That means you need to pay the 4 again the following turn or sacrifice this creature. But I hope that most of the time you're just gonna win when you resolve this card, because it has the activated ability to sacrifice an artifact to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. If that creature happens to be Lonus, you are going to create a clue token, which you can then sacrifice to put a +1/+1 counter on Lonus, which creates a clue token, and so on and so forth. And immediately you have an infinite Lonus genetic expert. That is what we did yesterday. Today, the first commander we're gonna talk about is very different because it is a merfolk. But I can already see that it has +1/+1 counters on it, so maybe not so different after all. Nikanzil, I love magic names. Current Conductor is a 2 mana card that reads, whenever a creature you control explores a land card, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. Whenever a creature you control explores a non-land card, put a +1/+1 counter on this guy. It comes down for just 2 mana, which I love. That means you have like an early curve topper. I mean, it's not really a curve topper, but you get what I mean. Like, you always have a turn 2 play. And personally, I'm pretty tired of everyone's turn 2 play being everyone's turn 2 play being ramp. So I love when someone gets their commander and their game plan started on turn 2 while everybody else is like waiting until turn 4 and 5. Bracket 5 or 4. Maybe I need to clarify. As the title says, the idea of the stream is I have a mainline series where I showcase commanders. And I kind of showcase which direction I would take them in. We talk about like 36 commanders in those videos. And what I do is like I give the type of card that is good with this commander. I don't build around a specific bracket ever, or like I don't choose cards for a bracket. The idea is always to get people brewing themselves. I don't want to showcase my decks because personally I don't think I'm that good of a deck builder. But I want to get people excited about commanders, maybe showcase some new cards or some new commanders. And then if you want to turn your Lonus into a turn 2 win with Extruder in your bracket 4+ deck, hey, that's cool. If somebody wants to build a bracket 1 Lonus deck, that's also fine. I'm really just here to say, hey, look at this cool commander. You can do evolve, you can do +1/+1 counters, you can go infinite, you can play affinity. this is a really cool card that I didn't know existed. Same for Extruder. That's the type of content that I'm trying to produce. And then bracket 5, I have absolutely no experience in, and bracket 4 and down, I can probably like give you some cards that would fit a certain category. Let's move on to the first one of today, which is this guy right here. And I mean, Commander says explore. Let's explore, I guess. There's a couple of cards that explore. For me, most notably, I mean, yes, this guy's from Ixalan, the Merfolk from Ixalan explore. So you're gonna play a bunch of Merfolk from Ixalan. For example, this guy, it explores every combat, and then it can become a copy of something. Hakbal makes it so all your Merfolk explore every combat. That's pretty sick. Jade Light Spelunker also explores X amount of times. You're gonna have a bunch of mana, right? Easy peasy. There's some good flexible cards, like Over the Edge, that fit perfectly, because you can either destroy an artifact or enchantment. That's going to be useful in every single commander like game ever played. Or you can explore twice. That's sick. Path of Discovery is one of my favorite enchantments as of recent times in green decks. Whenever a creature you control enters, it explores. Apart from that topography tracker, there's a bunch of Merfolk. Apart from that, it seems the actual explore package is not that deep. So we might need to look for some other things. Wildgrowth Walker, I remember there was an infinite combo. Wildgrowth Walker, whenever a creature you control explores, put a +1/+1 counter on this and gain 3 life. So the combo was whenever you gain life, it also explores. But that card was white and black, so quite far away from what we are trying to do. All right. So, if you have suggestions, by the way, I'm always so happy to get chat suggestions, even if they like might not end up in a video. I think in general we should try and like, yeah, just get the most out of this experience. What this guy does is he creates a bunch of landfall triggers. And I know like some people are gonna be like groaning already. Oh no. Blue-green landfall. How incredibly original. But I mean, not every deck needs to be original, for one. And I always try to advocate that like not every landfall deck is the same. Even if the payoffs sometimes feel very samey, you could be taking this into a proliferate direction, for example. Oftentimes, the best landfalling you can do is, I don't know, it's your Bristly Bill, whatever, your Azzy Tyrant Giant. But since we're exploring a bunch, that also means we're putting a bunch of +1/+1 counters on our creatures. That means Evolution Stage is much better than in some other landfall decks. So I know, yes, we're going to be playing a lot of overlap with other decks, but the detail is in the fine print or something like that. There's always some slight differences in every commander, in every deck building choice you make. Let's pick and choose some good ones. I mean, people are super familiar with the best landfall creatures. Nissa, Lotus Cobra, all give you mana. This guy, tap or untap, target creatures, super sick. But in general, like, here it is, in my opinion, not on me to showcase the good landfall cards. Everybody knows them. The question that I always have to ask myself is there something that we can showcase that is unique to this specific commander? Is there something that we can do that makes this more unique and more exciting? Because Route 1 is always available to everyone. It's a 2-drop, it's a 2/3. As I've said, something like, yeah, Evolution Sage is particularly good with this type of landfall commander. because you are also putting +1/+1 counters on him, but also potentially on all of these merfolk that are exploring. We could argue that this goes somewhat into a Voltron territory. Oftentimes, landfall is value city. It goes super duper hard. But maybe there's a card that we can use that makes it so we explore infinite times with, I don't know. Oh, the card is somewhere else. With the, was it Pathways? The 4-mana enchantment? That's Path of Discovery. The 4-mana enchantment here. I know there's also... So, I have a couple of different thoughts here. For one, we've talked already in a previous stream about cards that either delete all of the land cards from your deck or stack all of the land cards of your deck on top of your library. And this could mean that you ramp all of your land cards out. So whenever a creature you control explores. And then I'm thinking of cards like, I always forget, like, I think it's Scouting Track. Should be in here somewhere. No, maybe not. Scouting Track. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that card. I showcased it in one of my videos. Is it not the... Oh, Trek, just K? Okay, interesting. So, Scouting Track. 2-mana sorcery. Reveal your library, search your library for any number of basic land cards, reveal them, and set them aside. Then you shuffle your library and put all of the basics in your deck on top of your library. What I am wondering is, let's quickly add this to, was it NI? Yeah, you can see. What I'm wondering is, can you use this with this commander to get rid of all of the lands in your deck? So you would also be playing the package of probably Cultivator Colossus. These two cards are like handshake, like best buddies. Scouting Track puts all of the lands on top of your library. Cultivator Colossus makes it so you draw a card, then you get to put a land into play. Then you draw a card, put a land into play, and so on and so forth. Like, you get to do this until you run out of lands, which will never happen. Or at least only after 25 plus lands. And then I'm wondering if maybe you could do something with Cloudstone Curio. Now, Cloudstone Curio makes it so whenever a non-artifact permanent comes into play under your control, you may return another permanent you control that shares a permanent type with it to its owner's hand. That shares a permanent type. I will have to quickly look again at this guy right here, or at explore packages again. The basic idea I'm hoping to find is you play a deck of only basics, you play a Scouting Track to set up the top of your library. You have a Cloudstone Curio out, and then you just play C-Note Scout, put a land into play. Wait, let's double check the commander. Oh, it enters tapped. Okay, so it doesn't work that way. That's very unfortunate. That would mean even more... So the idea that I had was like to bounce 2 1-drops, a C-Note Scout, and maybe there's another 1-drop that explores to just get all of the lands from the top of your library. But unfortunately, the lands come into play tapped, which means that you wouldn't get the mana to do so. But maybe that brings us to the next point, right? Maybe in the deck building process, this is where you should ask yourself the question, okay, all of my lands enter tapped. Are we sure that's how we want it? Or are we playing Amulets? That's probably not how you write Amulets. Of Vigor. Are we playing these type of effects? I have a commander that puts 1,000,000 lands into play. Isn't it correct to play Amulet of Vigor, which reads whenever a permanent enters tapped under your control, instead you untap it? Speedrun on Simic commanders. I guess you could call it a speedrun. I mostly added the live tracker to make sure, A, you guys have an overview of who's next in line, and for me to B, also look at how long I take per commander. But yeah, that's like the basic idea. So idea is I have 38 commanders, and we try to go through them and kind of do a sales pitch. My job in my head is to do a sales pitch to, well, on stream to you guys, but also later in the form of a video that will be recorded separately to all of the viewers, right? Here we have Nikansil. This is what you can do with this guy. These are the combos that I personally would play. Then, if somebody decides to buy into the product, into Nikansil, they can do whatever they want. I'm simply here to say, hey, your guy makes it so your creatures explore a bunch. So, or like, and sorry, cares about exploring, so you're gonna be playing a bunch of explore merfolk. It puts lands into play tapped, so play Amulet of Vigor. At least that's my recommendation. And then what I want to explore now is whenever a creature you control explores a non-land card, put a +1/+1 counter on this guy. This is super duper Voltron-y. And we could be talking about how, like, all of these hardened scales type cards could end up in your deck. I don't think it's necessary, but if you read +1/+1 counters, at least think of hardened scales. And now the question becomes, is there like a sub-theme that we're forgetting? Everything we've done so far is super on the nose. Oh, he puts lands into play, we're playing landfall. Oh, he cares about exploring, we're gonna play explorer cards. Oh, he goes big with counters, let's play hardened scales. And my question is, what are we missing? There's oftentimes like I mean, it's not that deep, but like a hidden sub-theme in those commanders that often turns out like because of the secondary card choices you make, right? We're playing a bunch of merfolk, so maybe we should be looking into tribal synergies more. Stuff like that. Hey Pharaoh, welcome back. And sometimes, and this is, I'm completely open about this, sometimes, in my opinion, it's best to take a step back and take a look at what other people are doing. In my opinion, I don't use EDH to build my decks, but I do use EDH to get a good idea of what I'm missing. To just get, you know, that first impulse. So people here, we can say, yes, they did the route A approach. Explore, explore, explore. Landfall, more explore. But they don't seem to go super deep on any other themes, which is surprising to me. I would have thought that people were much more, like, would dive in much deeper. To me, it seems like they literally just play Merfolk Tribal, which is disappointing, I have to say. I think there's better Merfolk Tribal commanders also. One thing that I would like to point out here is there is an old tribe from Kamigawa. Right, this commander that we're playing right now, he just naturally makes it so you have a million lands in play. Landfall is nice. It always is. But I also want to look at the Moonfolk that exist. So we have a landfall, explore, +1/+1 counter commander. Moonfolk is a tribe that makes it so you can pay some mana and return lands to your hand to do whatever. And my question is there something here that we can use? Might not be the case, but in my opinion, it's always worth it to to check out this tribe if you're doing something with lands. We can make creatures unblockable here. That's interesting. We can return lands or creatures to owner's hands. Price is very steep though. Timing also not good. Copy instant and sorcery spell. That's pretty good. But I think this one is a dud. As always, if you guys have suggestions, please drop them. Because honestly, I'm a bit at a loss as to how to take this commander to the next level. My basic idea would be to kind of play him as a combo piece, because they didn't put any limiters on his effect. Which is quite strange, to be honest. But maybe they knew there was enough support. But that might just mean that we move on, because also in my videos, sometimes like I leave things as an open question. It's just gonna be like, hey, this is my idea, but I didn't find anything deeper. Then play good cards like Amulet of Vigor, because the lands enter tapped and you don't want that. Play Landfall, play Explore. Maybe there's a combo with Cloudstone Curio. And then, again, my job is to inspire people to go out there and deck build for themselves. So I don't think it's necessarily a complete failure if we don't have everything figured out. Vannifar. I think this one is far more easy to figure out. So Vannifar is a 4-mana 2/4 elf ooze wizard. I never realized she's an ooze, by the way. That is kind of relevant nowadays. But of course we care mostly about her text box. She taps to sacrifice another creature, and then you search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1, plus the sacrificed creature's converted mana cost, or mana value as it nowadays is called. And you put that card onto the battlefield, you shuffle, and you can only do this at sorcery speed. Okay. We can get into the nitty-gritty of how you win every game on turn 4. But first, I want to give a shout out to what I think is the OG here. Like, Birthing Pod used to be a modern staple until it got banned, and it is quite a similar effect. 4 mana, one of them Phyrexian, so you can play it on turn 3. And the activated ability costs 1 plus a Phyrexian green mana. You sacrifice a creature and kind of do the exact same thing as Vannifar. Why am I talking about this card? Your commander does the exact same thing. Excuse me. Why would you be playing a card like Birthing Pod? If you sit down at a table with a Prime Speaker Vannifar, everybody is going to keep up their mana and kill Prime Speaker Vannifar on sight the turn it comes down. Because let's be honest, you're not playing this guy or this person to be particularly fair to your table. There is a way to build a fair Prime Speaker Vannifar. Of course there is. You can do everything with anything, pretty much. But let's first talk about the combo side. Birthing Pod, I love it when you have backup pieces that do exactly what your must-remove commander do. Creatures, much harder to kill than artifacts. Although artifacts are not that hard to kill either. Well, I mean, so Vannifar makes it so you sacrifice a creature to get another creature that is 1 more expensive. You can only do this once each turn, technically, because you have to tap Vannifar. If only there was a way to untap Vannifar. We're gonna order by mana value, and then ascending is fine. Untap. Probably creature. There's a few too many results. Okay. Well. There is not that many 1-drops, but Quarian Ranger is a 1-drop that returns a forest you control to untap target creature. Do this only once. You have your Quarian Ranger on the battlefield. Maybe you sacrifice Vanifar, you don't even need technically. Okay. Let's go one step further. Dryad Arbor. You have your Vanifar out, and we're going to start with a Dryad Arbor. Dryad Arbor is a green creature that is 0 mana value because it's also a land. Let's say you have some way to give haste, and then you can kind of start off your combo. The most classic example, sorry to go back and forth here, is of course Lightning Greaves. You have some way to give haste. There's a bunch of them, even in green. So you have your Dryad Arbor, you sacrifice it, you get a Quarian Ranger. You return a forest to untap your Vanifar, and sacrifice the Quarian Ranger. Then at 2, you don't need to go quite as hard. You can play stuff like Aphedo Alchemist, but we can do it much easier by playing stuff like Corridor Monitor. When it enters, you untap Vanifar. You untap Vanifar, you sacrifice your Corridor Monitor, you go to 3, and this is where you find... Oh, there's probably going to be a bunch of 2-drops. This is where you find... I honestly can't remember, but let's say Deceiver Exarch. You untap Vanifar, you sacrifice Deceiver Exarch, you go to 4. And this is kind of how you go through the combo. I don't think I'm going to go to super high mana value stuff. But that's the basic idea of how you get to really high mana value cards without, you know, starting with a 6-drop. Now, there is a way that you can combo. You can probably just go to EDH Rec, and every combo piece is going to be like in the most played cards ever. So I don't think we need to go super in depth here. Let's talk about some other cards that work differently, right? Here we have this, this chain of creatures that you chain together, you sacrifice them all to work your way up. But there is some creatures that simply start at a higher mana cost, even though you never paid actual money, actual mana for them. We usually talk about everything in regards to Delve, which is fair, but most Delve creatures, to be fair, are in black. So here I want to showcase a different creature, and that is Allosaurus Rider. It's a 7 mana, 1+ star. We don't really care about anything except this line of text. You may remove 2 green cards in your hand from the game rather than pay Allosaurus Rider's mana cost. And here, like Delve, like Suspend, like so many mechanics, for example, well, Evoke doesn't work here because we can only do a sorcery speed, but this is a way to get a high mana value creature into play, and then you sacrifice it to Prime Speaker Vanifar. And then we can quickly take a peek. Card type creature, mana value 8. What is the biggest, the baddest thing that we can do at 8? I assume there's some really good, well-known payoffs. Let's see if we find one. Oh, I always give this card the side. Like, I really want to play Colossus of Akros at some point, but so far the opportunity has not arisen. Well, Craterhoof Behemoth. You could be getting Allosaurus Rider into Craterhoof Behemoth, or, I mean, it's probably the best payoff. Let's not kid ourselves. Or an 8/8 Trample. That's also possible. It's totally up to you. Platinum Empyrean. Those are the type of cards that you can play as your top end. Let me quickly add Craterhoof to this tag of Prime Speaker Vanifar. All right, so that's the basic idea. You either have this combo chain of untapping Vanifar all of the time to work your way up, or you have cards that cheat high mana values into play different ways. For example, Allosaurus Rider, but we can also, of course, play cards like Hooting Mandrill's 6 mana, but it has Delve, so you can play a 6 mana value card for just 1 mana. In general, like, this section of the video is insanely helpful here. The plot cards also work in a way, right? Murktide Regent with Delve. The warp cards don't work quite as nicely. Actually, they kind of do. So we could be, let's add a few of them. Speak of NFR. So in case you missed yesterday's stream, we also talked about how warp is one of those mechanics where you get high mana value cards into play. I know Quantum Riddler is a card that you would like to keep in play, but you warp it into play after you have your Prime Speaker Vanifar already, and then you can sacrifice it as a 5 mana creature, even though you only paid 2 mana. Similarly, you suspend Riftwing Cloudskate on turn 2, it comes down, you sacrifice it, it's a 5-drop. I think if you want to build a strictly like value engine Prime Speaker Vanifar, you completely get rid of all of these like chain cards, and you start playing more just actual good cards. If we're going value Prime Speaker, which I assume is gonna see more play because in my experience, people would absolutely despise if I played this as a combo deck. Like, it would only be played in bracket 4 or greater, and personally, in my game store, bracket 4 is like already very rarely played. So let's talk about some cards that are fine being sacrificed and still provide value. I'm thinking, of course, of keywords like Undying. So maybe there's not the best cards here. Young Wolf, again, is kind of a combo piece. I'm going to choose it because it is a well-known card, not because it is a good card that should end up in your deck. The basic idea is you're looking for cards that you can sacrifice to Prime Speaker Vanifar that still give you some benefit. In this case, the creature just comes back. Instead of Undying, there's also like a complementary mechanic of Persist. So Persist, let's say, is there a good card here? Woodfall Primus. I think would be a prime example of a card that ends up in a Prime Speaker Vanifar deck. It's an 8 mana 6/6. When it enters, destroy target non-creature permanent. And you can even sacrifice it and it comes back once with a -1/-1 counter. There is some more cards that is dies, I think, is a new keyword, and the typing is probably Druid. There's a few Druids that I know care about being sacrificed. If you think cards like Yavimaya Elder, 3 mana 2/1, when it dies, such a library for 2 basic lands, put them into your hand. Stuff like this is what you would do if you were to go the value route. Personally, I absolutely love Eudora Gravegardener. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. It's a forest land. This means every creature that you sacrifice to Vanifar turns into ramp, which is pretty sick, by the way. Here, Seed Guide, such a forest for 3 forests, such a library for 3 forests, put them into play tapped. Hey, that's pretty sick. Anything else that comes to mind? Unfortunately, creatures dying is not yet a keyword in Magic. I wish I could just, like in Hearthstone, search for Death Rattle, but I mean, technically I can still like search for a more complicated wording. What else are we missing? We have Undying, we have Persist. Is there something else that obvious that I'm missing about Sacrifice Chaos? So we can look at the phrase, since our commander sacrifices. Let's look at the phrase whenever sacrifice. I know something like Altar of the Brood comes to mind. I'm not sure how good that is going to be for you in your Vanifar deck. Let's see. Do we find something good here? When this guy attacks. Not yet. I don't see anything immediately. Say it's when you sacrifice this or another artifact. No, we're looking to sacrifice a bunch of creatures. Whenever you sacrifice, well, I guess, then let's be more specific. We care about creature. Whenever a player plays a creature spell, no, that's not what we're looking for. Whenever you cast, whenever you play. Nothing immediately jumps at me, and I'm blanking on like cards that are good payoffs for you sacrificing things. I mean, to showcase what I'm thinking is, and again, this is not a card that would end up in your deck, but I'm thinking Altar of the Brood. Whenever another permanent you control enters, oh, god damn it, that's not even the thing that I'm thinking of. Do you guys know any good payoffs for this? For sacrificing? I mean, we're thinking aristocrats when we're thinking sacrifice, but we are in blue-green, not in black. So there might not be all that much to it. And it's not like it's super necessary, this is just what I'm always saying. So Route A for Vannifar, in my opinion, is combo. Route B is like high-value creatures. And then Route C, or Route 3, I always forget what the what the actual saying is. And then, yeah, these secondary effects that just naturally slot in your deck, that's what I'm looking for right now. We already have a decent Vannifar deck right in front of us. We untap Vannifar, we play good high mana value payoffs. And I'm really looking to squeeze the most out of Vannifar here. If not, then I think I'm going to move on. Yes, we talked again about these mechanics. They always come up, and I think they deserve their own video of high mana value things that you pay little to no mana for. I think that's an interesting topic of discussion. Rush Me. One of the cards that I actually have some experience with, although it is so far back that I forget everything. Let's move on to the sideboard. Give her the tag that she deserves. And let's move the counter. Yes, guys, for once I thought about the counter. Rush Me is another 4-mana Simic commander. She's a 2/3 elf druid, and whenever you cast your first spell each turn, you reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card with converted mana cost less than the spell you cast, you may cast a spell from the top of your library without paying its mana cost. If you don't, instead you draw that card. Here, a lot of things come together. We've talked a lot about quite a few things. With different commanders is what I'm saying. Let's first tie back into what we just finished talking about, because it's going to come up again and again and again and again. And the more I look at commanders, the more I look at deck building, the more I realize how incredibly stupid these cards are. Warp goes in here. Evoke goes in here. Oh god, wistfulness. Wistfulness. This goes in here. Reason being, you cast Rush Me, you cast Willfulness for just 2 mana. It counts as a 5 mana spell. If the top of your library costs 4 or less, you get to cast it for free. The idea is clear. I'm not going to go into detail again here because, well, we talked about it to death. We also talked about another thing, at least in the summary in this stream, and of course in full detail in another stream. And that is, we had a commander that cares about you casting stuff during other people's turns in Kian, right? And we said Well, if you're casting things during other people's turns, that means you're playing Wilderness Reclamation. That means you're playing Seedborn Muse. And that means you're playing cards like Stinging Lionfish, or sorry, Stinging. I always think of Stingy. Rush me. And you're playing Wavebreak Hippocamp, right? Whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turns. Because, again, remember, Rush Me says whenever you cast your first spell each turn, not during your turn. So to squeeze the most out of Rush Me, we want to be casting a spell during every player's turn. Quite simply put. Now, that means you are going to be playing a bunch of cards that have either flash or that are instants naturally. So actually, let's talk about some instants that haven't gotten a mention because we only talked about creatures so far. But of course, you are playing, I don't know, you're playing Logic Knot, a Delve counterspell. You're playing Treasure Cruise, a 1 mana but 8 mana value draw 3 cards. You're playing these cards in your deck because, well, they have this high mana value in the top right corner. In Logic Knot's case, you even have an instant speed card. I think that much is obvious. And I am starting to forget one more thing that I wanted to mention that we already talked about. Let me quickly skim through all of these commanders that we talked about so far. Seedborn Muse, Teferi. Yes, and I think you're playing cards like High Fae Trickster that just make it so you can cast anything at instant speed. I think that just makes sense. Your deck is not going to be chock full of flash cards, for example, or instants. You're going to be playing all of these good cards. You'd much prefer them if they were instant speed. So, yeah. Wait, did I add them to the wrong one? Yeah, I added them to Prime Speak of NFR. High Fae Trickster, you may cast things as although they had instant speed, and Alchemist's Refuge, very low opportunity cost because it comes in the form of a land. And yeah, you're just going to be having this lying around, and then it's going to have its time to shine once or twice every match, or like every couple of matches is what I'm trying to say. And then the last thing, and I'm kind of surprised that I think we haven't talked about this all that much, top of library manipulation. Yes, you're going to be playing Worldly Tutor. Worldly Tutor. Am I crazy? No, I'm just very bad at typing. Yes. Instant, search a library for a creature card, put that card on top. Super easy to see, right? You choose any creature, put it on top of your library, you play something more expensive, and you're gonna get that card for free. Oh, wow, my typing is getting worse and worse by the day. It might seem like this is rage bait, it's really not. Brainstorm, of course, maybe not quite as powerful as Worldly Tutor, but also much more affordable. And it's not like you only want one of these effects. You're going to be playing as many as you can get. So, your deck is going to be Rush Me. Your deck is going to be payoffs for playing spells during other people's turns. You want cards that make it so you can play stuff as though it had flash. You're going to be playing stuff that untaps your lands so you can have the mana to play stuff during everyone's turn. And then what are we missing? We have all of these Warp, Delve, whatever cards. I actually want to talk about one subset of cards here that is probably vastly underplayed. And that is a couple of cards that are pretty old. Maybe it's worded... No, sorry. It's not instead of paying. It is worded differently. It's rather than pay. So, in, I believe it was Mercadian Masks where they first did this. It might be earlier. They printed a bunch of cards that are free to cast and have some form of cost attached to them. That cost back then could be anything. I'm sure everybody knows Gush and Daze, as well as maybe Flare of Denial and Foil. So, Daze and Gush, you return islands to your hand to do something. Remember, yes, you're returning lands to your hand, but Gush is a 5-mana spell, so if you're at the top of your library, costs less than 5, you get to cast that card for free. That is still a steep price to pay. But thankfully, also we can talk about Force of Will, I guess it's a 5-mana card again. But I want to talk about a different subset of cards. Because for blue, the cost was most of the time to return lands to their hand. Green had different costs. For example, if we look at Invigorate, if you control a forest, rather than pay the spell's mana cost, you may have an opponent gain 3 life. And really, that is not a cost at all. I genuinely believe this card should go into a lot more green-based, at least Voltron decks. Because nobody suspects the green player to have 0 mana pump spells. Maybe one in the form of the one that is Phyrexian mana +2/+2. But to get a sudden spike of +4/+4, that can really catch people off guard. For 0 mana, right? They're gonna be like, haha, the green player is not a blue player. What can they do with 0 mana? Well, they can do stuff like this. In a deck like Rush Me, this is a 0 mana, 3 mana value card that can potentially cast a 2 or a 1 cost card from the top of your library. Very interesting. And there's more cards like this. I know, for example, yeah, here, if you control a forest, you can have every other player gain 6 to destroy all enchantments. It's a 4-cost card that you play for free. Stuff like Summoning Trap, yes, we can also talk about those. That's a newer cycle of cards. 6 mana, and there's always a condition, kind of a trap. They really tried to capture the Yu-Gi-Oh feeling of, haha, you activated my trap card. You actually get to say it at the table. Because if a creature spell you cast this turn was countered by a spell or an ability, pay 0 rather than pay this cost, like pay this card's cost. So yeah, you get to cast a 6 mana value card for 0 mana. Pretty sick. There's a couple more of these. I'm not sure if there's anything worthwhile to talk about here. Instead, let's talk about the boring stuff. Let's eat our vegetables and let's play our Senses Divining Tops, our Scroll Rex. Not exciting to talk about because everybody knows about them, but again, those are kind of the veggies that you should be putting into your deck if you have the money or you're willing to proxy, because both of these cards are, yeah, like 16 euros, 23 euros. Congrats. Never gonna be reprinted until like 20 years time. So yeah, what I really want to highlight here is Route A is, okay, I use that phrasing too much. The obvious thing is you ramp out Rush Me on turn 2, you play a ramp spell. On turn 3, you play Rush Me, and then every turn during your turn, you play a big dumb guy. And potentially it gets another big dumb guy. If not, it draws you a card. Then we talked about the warp stuff again. What I really want to highlight is these Invigorate type cards where you pay an alternate cost that could be anything. Or cards like Summoning Trap. And, oh yeah, I guess one more card that we could be or one thing that we could be playing in here. So remember, this says, when you cast your first spell, reveal the top card of your library, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. And whenever you get to play something without paying the mana cost, you can look for mana value 0. It's probably sorceries. yeah, you can play Ancestral Vision, Gaia's Will, Inevitable Trail, Crashing Footfall. These cards, usually you have to suspend. They're like homages to older cards like Bribery or Ancestral Recall, and they don't have an actual mana value. That means you can't cast them unless you get to cast them without paying their mana cost, which of course we're trying to do. Or no, we're not trying, we're gonna do it. I'm gonna quickly add the tag Ancestral Vision. And these are in here. So what I'm thinking is sometimes you're maybe gonna tutor them to the top of your library if that's what you want to do. Sometimes you're just gonna hit it. And your deck cannot only be these super expensive cards. You're also gonna be playing Stinging Lionfish type cards, right? And sometimes just randomly, you're gonna be playing a Stinging Lionfish and you're gonna hit Ancestral Vision and you're gonna be the happiest man at the local game store that evening. I think that's all I have to say about Rashmi. She really combines a lot of the things that we already talked about, which is always thankful. I'm always thankful for that because that means I don't have to use a lot of brain power. And it shows that kind of the more you deck build, just naturally, the easier it also gets, in my opinion. Because you have all of these reference points. Oh, I read high mana value, I think Warp. Oh, I see cast without casting that spell or paying that spell's mana cost, I think Ancestral Vision. I read first spell each turn, I'm thinking Flash. And you really pick up a lot of these instant connotations, if you will, which I found quite interesting. Let's move on. Ooh, super duper expensive card, by the way. So definitely for the higher brackets of, maybe not higher brackets, but for the people who are willing to proxy or pay a lot of money. Tamio, your $25 one cost commander. Personally, I have, sorry, she gets her own tag, of course. In this case, TA, I guess. Hashtag TA. No. Tamio. I love one cost commanders. Again, I love breaking the play pattern. A commander always is tapped land, go. 2 mana, Signet, or if you're green, ramp spell, go. Turn 3, either ramp again or play your commander or whatever. So I really love if someone's like, turn 1, I play my commander, go. It really sets a different tonality for a game, so I love that. Let's read what she actually does. She's a 1-drop. She's a 0/3 Moonfolk Wizard, which are both like really notable tribes, which is something I haven't paid a lot of attention to so far, but maybe this time around we will. She has flying and she investigates when she attacks. Whenever you draw your 3rd card in a turn, you exile Tamio, and then you return her to the battlefield transformed. And she transforms into Tamio Seasoned Scholar, a planeswalker that starts with just 2 loyalty counters. +2 until your next turn whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control. It gets -1, -0. This is the typical uptick protect myself ability that almost every planeswalker has. -3 is return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. If it's a green card, add 1 mana of any color. -7, draw cards equal to half the number of the cards in your library, rounded up. You get an emblem with, you have no maximum hand size. The backside, I would say, follows a very typical planeswalker layout of +1 protect myself, -2. I mean, oftentimes it's minus protect myself, but in this case it's -2 get some value, and the -7 is just win the game. But let's start at the front side and slowly dissect what Tamio does. So first of all, First of all, she investigates. So she creates a bunch of clue tokens. We've had commanders that I quickly mentioned during the summary of last stream that care about clue tokens. The Lawless Genetic Expert and Cryptozoologist cards both care about clues. They also create a bunch of clues, which Tamio is much, much, much slower at doing. That does not mean we cannot poach from this selection, in my opinion. No, these guys go hardcore on clues. Tamio is going to produce 1, 2, maybe 3 clues in a game. That is, in my opinion, good enough to at least think about including stuff like Inspiring Statuary. 3 mana, non-artifact spells you control have improvised. That means you can tap artifacts to pay for generic cost. That means you are probably playing cards like Thoughtcast and Thought Monitor. They play double duty in a sense, as in they benefit off of the investigate tokens, the clue tokens, but they also draw cards that work towards flipping Tamio. Pretty easy to see why this is good, right? Same for Universal Surveillance, which I didn't know existed. I'm gonna check if this is a reprint or if this is an Edges of Eternity cards. No, it has existed for a little while now. Neon Dynasties, I guess. I think that's about all I would poach from here, except for maybe Academy Manufacturer, although I'm not the biggest fan here. We can talk about Displacer Kitten in a second. I'm going to add it to the thingy here. Then we're going to move down. We're going to poach from this selection, although I think there's not much we poach here. Yeah, it seems like this is 2 creature and +1/+1 counter focused. I know scrolling down I will see one more card that is, of course, insane with Tamio, and that is Brainstorm. This one's obvious. Tamio says whenever you draw your 3rd card, Brainstorm can draw your 3rd card anytime, any day. Because it itself, of course, draws 3 cards. Why I like Displacer Kitten? Tamio is going to be paired with a bunch of instants, in my opinion, and sorceries. So Displacer Kitten can flicker stuff like Thought Monitor. Sometimes it's going to flicker your Tamio to maybe protect it, to maybe reset like the Planeswalker loyalty counters. So I think it is a super flexible card. It shows in a price tag, fair warning, but yeah, it's an insane card. I wouldn't focus too hard on the investigating that Tamio does. This is something that just kind of happens, but really the payoffs are on the flip side. +1 is too generic. Until your next turn, whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, it gets -0, -1 until end of turn. That is, it's gonna happen, but you're not particularly happy about it. The -3 is where things get interesting. Mostly, I'm sorry that I go back to this example, especially since people really don't like that all that much, at least in my experience. But if you have a Planeswalker that accrues value every single turn, that can pick up an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, that instant or sorcery should most likely be an extra turn spell. It sounds so boring, but it's gonna feel incredible. From my experience, that's just one of the best things you can do with Tamio. You can even turn this into a Super Friends type deck. I know there's a 4-mana Tamio that does kind of the same. Let's actually look for it. Tamio. Of course, oftentimes cards like legendaries that have the same name often work in tandem quite nicely because they will always have somewhat of the same mechanics. Tamio, Collectors of Tales, makes it so -3, you return a card from your graveyard to your hand. You could definitely turn this into a Super Friends deck. Even if you don't, there is one card that would go into a Super Friends type deck that you would also play if this was the only Planeswalker you were playing, in my opinion. and that is Inexorable Tide. One of those cards that is just a bit too obscene, in my opinion. And I'm surprised it doesn't see more play. Maybe that is because it is a little too strong for a lot of the bracket 2 and 3 type, or bracket 2 and 3 tables. So Inexorable Tide, 5 mana, pretty expensive, but you're playing green, so who cares? Whenever you cast a spell, Proliferate. Well, even if this is your only Planeswalker, proliferating to repeatedly get back instant sorceries from your graveyard, like Time Warp, potentially, is insanely strong. And even just like proliferating this so you can get the -7, which is obviously game winning, also insanely strong. Is there something obvious we're missing? If it's a green card, add 1 mana of any color. Is that a line of text that we deem worthy? And this time I forgot to move the thing. Oh, actually, oops. Sorry, I guess I don't have Tamio in the images, unfortunately. I'm very sorry. Well, they'll have to deal with it. So my question is that line of text worthy to play around? I don't think so. I think this is just gonna happen. Yeah. -7, also not something we need to build around. I don't think we need to go much deeper here. What I would like to do is I would like to find 1 or 2 more like of these insane cards to pick back up. Like in instants and sorceries that are just incredible if you get to cast them again. Actually, turn spells are pretty good. There is also stuff that takes control of things. So we could say, like, take control of target instant or source, or like of target thing, wherever. I mean, yeah, expropriate, but it's also an extra turn spell. But you exile it, unfortunately. Not really. Well, I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to lose much more time here. And I think Tamio really is straightforward. What fascinates me so much is that she's a 1-drop. Really, that's mostly it. I have a knack for 1-drop commanders. You're gonna be proliferating. You're gonna be playing Brainstorm and Brain Surge. Let's actually add it, Brain Surge. Brain Surge, kind of a fixed Brainstorm, draw 4, put 2 on top. You're going to be playing a bunch of these cards. And you're going to be happy returning Time Warps or whatever, Thoughtcasts to your hand. The next one I am even more excited about. It's the one that you have on screen. Well, now, from the latest Lorwyn set, we get one commander that excites me quite a bit. It's Tom the Mindful First Year. There's a bunch of first years from Strixhaven that wound up on the plane of Lorwyn, and that are kind of like the centerpiece for the upcoming story, as far as I know. In Tom's case, we have a 2-drop on our hands that is a Gorgon Wizard. She's a 2/2, nothing to write home about. And each other creature you control has hexproof from each of its colors. To make this work, Tom also taps to make target creature you control become all colors until end of turn. This is obviously also this is also meant to protect all of your creatures in case they are targeted by spot removal. Is this a speed run to complete most interesting Simic decks? This is less of a speed run. I know I make it look a lot like a speed run. The idea here is we have 38 really, really interesting commanders. And I want to do sales pitches, like these elevator pitches for all of them, because I want you guys to get excited for them. I'm not going to build a deck for you. because I think that's quite boring, and potentially you are a much better deck builder than I am. What I want is I want to get your gears grinding. I want you to start thinking about what you would like to do with these commanders. I'm streaming this as research for a YouTube video that is going to come out in like 3 or 4 weeks, where I summarize in like a 2-hour video all of these 38 commanders. But because doing research alone is A, boring, and B, these streams have proven to add so much value because you guys suggest really, really good cards and takes on commanders. I split up all of these 38 commanders and we talk about ways to build them. So yeah, for example, we had Rush Me. We talk about all of these elements that this text box makes you think about, right? That all of these elements that you should be considering when you build around Rush Me. And right now, we arrived at Tom, the Mindful First Year. That makes it so creatures have hexproof. Your creatures have hexproof from all of their colors. And she also turns things into all colors. Now, this is part of Lorwyn Eclipsed, and Lorwyn Eclipsed has prominently featured or even introduced, I think, a keyword called... Man, I had it in my head for like a minute, and I yapped so much that I forgot it. What's the keyword, guys? Oh my god, Vivid. Yes, Vivid is the keyword I'm looking for. Now, Vivid most prominently featured on a card that has existed before this was keywordified. It's a 2-mana 1/1 Elf Druid. Tap for each color among permanents you control. Add 1 mana of that color. This is an insane payoff. From a 2-mana card, you would expect 1 mana. If that 2-mana card provides 2 mana, you're already happy. AKA, you play Bloom Tender and you have a blue and a green permanent somewhere. That's already above rate. If this taps for 5 mana, you are so happy. Unfortunately, I gave this a quick check. There's not that many creatures that care about Vivid. Another good card, for example, is Aurora Awakener. A 7-mana 7/7 trample. When it enters, it checks for how many colors you have. Then you reveal that many permanent cards from the top of your library. So you dig until you hit, in the best case, 5 permanent cards. And then you put all of those permanent cards onto the battlefield. Unfortunately, this guy does not say non-land permanents, which is, I think, why also this card didn't perform in Standard. At least that's what I heard. And then, unfortunately, if we look down the line, let's take a look at Elemental Spectacle, a card that I actually don't know. You create 5/5s equal to the number of colors you control, and then you gain life. That's a 6 mana, create 25 power. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but in Commander, it doesn't get me too excited. You're probably still playing it. Disenchantment, when it enters such a library for X basic land cards, where X is the number of colors, put them into your hand, and you may play an additional land on each of your turns. That's a good effect. Like, this secondary effect is enough to be considered, but I would cost it at like 2.5 mana. And then this effect makes it so you have the land drops. That's kind of it for Vivid cards. But, wait, do they use the English or the American color? Color among... And then let's say just control, because it could be permanents or it could be creatures. I'm wondering if there's more than this. Okay. Now, Vivid is a keyword, but let's not forget that sometimes we have effects that are kind of like this, but not with the Vivid keyword. Case of the Shattered Pact is a 2-mana case, which, if you don't know, a case always has an ETB. When this case enters such a library for a basic land card, put it in your hand. It's pretty mediocre. Then it has a condition. You need to solve the case. In the case of Shattered Pact, you solve it by having 5 colors among permanents you control, aka you activate Tom once. And then solved at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains flying, double strike, vigilance until end of turn. It is up to you if you want to play a card like this and if you can make use of this effect. My assumption is going to be yes. Chromatic Orrery, also quite nice. 7 mana, pretty expensive, unfortunately, again. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. It taps to add 5 generic mana, or 5 colorless, which you can, of course, use for anything. And then 5 mana, tap, draw a card for each color among permanents you control. If you have a TAM, that will most likely mean 5 mana, draw 5 cards. That is pretty good. What else do we find here? Well, a lot of vivid stuff that isn't all that good. I mean, this is nice. This is like 2 mana, tap 2 creatures, put stun counters on them, draw a card. That's pretty worth it, even in Commander. Draw a card for each color among permanents you control. On a 6 mana card for 7 mana, this doesn't get me too excited, but it's worth a mention. And then, is that it? I don't want to believe that it is it. But Tom is one of those commanders that are worded so openly, and I don't have like these keywords, these phrases that come to mind. Let's quickly add those before we move on. And if I don't have an inkling of what to do, I looked at the set. The support isn't deep enough. I tried to type in a phrasing that is on the commander. That's the point where I look at EDA track and look at what the hive mind has decided to build. And here we see all of the cards that are super obvious. And here we see green and blue tribal, if you will. So, where like green and blue matters. Murkfiend Liege is insane. It's a card that I consistently forget exists. Merc Liege? Is that how you type it? Probably not. Maybe like this. Probably also not. Murkfiend Liege. Murkfiend. Yeah. I think it's already in here for some reason. Ah, yes. We talked about untapping stuff a bunch. It's a 5 mana card from OG Lorwyn, or I believe this is Eventide, but you know, the OG Lorwyn block. Green creatures get +1/+1. Blue creatures get +1/+1. Untap all green and or blue creatures you control during each other player's untap step. It's very easy to see how like your creatures having those colors is pretty nice. Your TAM untaps. And I just remembered that there is from Tarkir a type of card. I only know one of those cards, but potentially there's more, that cares about you having the other cards from their respective tribe. In this case, it was Sultai. If you control black permanent, I believe was the wording. Okay. Yeah, see, there's a bunch here. This guy, just as an example, it's a bad card, but I want to give you an example of the type of card that I'm thinking about. 4 mana 3/3, but it has lifelink as long as you control a white or black permanent. This is the type of card that I like to showcase because the card itself showcases what Tom can do that no one else can do. In Commander, you're so heavily restricted by your color identity that these cards just fall out of the wayside. Onto the wayside? Whatever. This card is unplayable in Commander if you don't play an Abzan deck. It is not unplayable in Tom. Even though your color identity doesn't include white or black, you can still play this card. Now, it's a terrible card, but maybe in here we find a better card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control a blue or black permanent, target creature gets +1/+1. If you control a blue permanent and a black permanent, that creature gets +5/+5 in turn. This effect is slightly better. It's not insane, but it's slightly better. And it's, yeah. It's what we're looking for. I was thinking of a different kind of guy. If you control, maybe he didn't care about, no, he cared about black permanents, I'm pretty sure. Black. If you control, I was thinking of like an unblockable kind of guy. Let's talk about Sign of Draco. It is a 12 mana 4/4, but it costs 2 less for each basic land type among lands you control. This means that for you, it's still an 8 cost card unless we find a different way to get it into the battlefield or to get more basic land types. Because of course, if you have all 5 basic land types, this is a 2 cost card. Even still, even if you play this for like 6 mana because you found a way to get an extra land type, the effect is supremely powerful in a TAM deck. Each creature you control has Vigilance if it's white, Hexproof if it's blue, Lifelink if it's black, First Strike if it's red, and Trample if it's green. This card is meant to be played in Domain decks, and Domain specifically always cares about basic land types, which unfortunately, and I think this is a bit of an oversight, TAM cannot change the basic land typing. There is a card that can do this, and it's going to appear later on this list, and it's Omo, Queen of Vezuva. Now, Omo, when it enters, puts an everything counter on each of up to 1 target land and 1 target creatures, and the creature becomes every type, the land becomes every land type. Unfortunately, TAM and Omo, while they sound very similar as in they give something everything, every color in TAM's case, every creature / land type in Omo's case, I don't think they have that much of an overlap. I think you can make them work. You can splice them together. You're gonna have a good deck, but it is not the natural fit that I would like it to be. Those are different mechanics. This encourages you to play like a bunch of lords or a bunch of like weird land types like the Urza's lands, whereas TAM the first year specifically makes it so you care about colors, which is quite different. Also, actually, I want to showcase something because I think this is the last commander I'm going to do. Yesterday, I lost my voice quite quickly, and it's kind of a natural cutoff point. I want to showcase one more thing that maybe some of you don't know about. Maybe all of you do, and that's really cool. But let's look for Tom Mindful first year on Scryfall. And let's actually type her correctly. Now, everybody knows Scryfall, but what some people don't know is the Scryfall Tagger. Scryfall Tagger is like a subsidiary of Scryfall. It's probably not the right word, but whatever. And here, I don't know how these tags are distributed, maybe by people. Here, you can see these tags. For example, the tag Synergy Color Each. Now, if we click on this tag, we're going to find probably not every color that is synergistic with Color Each, but we get a good impression. Now, in here, I'm not sure if you can, you can see that there's white cards in here that we cannot play, but you can also then open it back into, go back into Scryfall, and then add CI equals greater. I think that's how you type it. Blue-green. And then we only have the blue-green cards, right? And then here we see, okay, here is an equipment that gives +1/+0 for each color. It's similar to Conqueror's Flail, which we already saw. We can mention it So let's add Civic Saber. Civic. Was it Saber? Yeah. It's like one of those cards that is not good in any deck. It's pretty good in your TAM deck, most likely. And let's see if we find other payoffs here. Meteor Crater, not quite as... Like, it's one of those lands that is meh into color decks. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn for each of its color. Nice. This is a card that also gives you a hint as to what you could be searching for in a normal Scryfall search, by the way. Each of its colors is something that I would then usually just go back into. Let's not forget what the card is called, is Might of the Nephilim. Card that I didn't know existed, but it's pretty sweet because remember, +10/+10 on a commander is half of a one-shot. I mean, that's just how it is, right? Even though Tom is only a 2/2, if you give it +5/+0 and then +10/+10, that puts people very close to dying. And then maybe another +5/+5. Maybe we're onto something. Let's add the Conqueror's Flail. Maybe... No. The Conquerors... Is it because of the... Man, whatever. Let's just look for Flail. Too hard to type. Maybe we're onto something here. Maybe this is like the secret hidden Voltron commander of this list. Some Voltron commanders are very obvious, but sometimes you just realize that the subset you're looking at is like, oh, this cares about you having a lot of colors, this cares about you having a lot of colors, this cares about you having a lot of colors, and they all give a bunch of stat boosts. So maybe that's where we end up. Ooh, yes, Dragonfire Blade also cares about colors. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has hexproof from monocolored. Equip 4, but this ability costs 1 less to activate for each color of the creature it targets. I played this deck just naturally in a 3-color commander deck, and it's very good because Equip 1, it's pretty sick. Equip 0 is insane. So let's include Dragonfire Blade. And again, for some reason, we have another equipment that boosts power. It just seems like so weird to me that this is what is the hidden synergy. But yeah. For each color among monocolored permanents you control, add 1 mana of that color. Unfortunately, that doesn't work because we turn something into all colors. Monocolored permanents you control, that's interesting. Your graveyard, this guy. For each color used. Okay. Let's look for colors. I know there's a bunch of color hate. And by the way, this is not the end of it. Like, you could also go back and say, let's say, color change. You could also look at color change and see if there's something good in here. What I want to look at real quick is just colors. So a lot of the times, just adding an S to make it the plural is enough to shrink down the selection a lot. You see, the word colors is just on 85 cards. Oftentimes it's like, see, my voice cracks already. Okay, this cares about colors of mana spent because Converge is in here. Usually if a keyword like Converge pops up too much, I do like minus Oracle. What's it called? Converge, and then you get rid of those cards because you know that mechanic specifically doesn't work. For 85 cards, if I was just doing this on my own, I wouldn't change it because that's really not a lot of cards. Mm, sacrifice a creature. Count the colors of the sacrificed creatures, then search a library for a creature card that's exactly that many colors, +1. That's interesting, but we don't benefit off of it that much. Because in our library, the creatures are still going to be just 2 colors. Similarly, unfortunately for this, the Wayfarer, this guy is all colors, which is pretty cool. I mean, we're still going to play it. This guy's all colors, but this ability doesn't affect its color identity, which is, it's made specifically for commanders, or for commander/EDH. Multicolored spells you have Convoke. Now, again, as I just said, our spells are not going to be multicolored all of the time because Tom can only affect things on the battlefield. We are still going to have multicolored spells like, well, Glister Baron, which not only is like one of the cutest Niels Hum illustrations, but interestingly enough, it also plays into the Voltron theme, by the way. And it's just naturally, right, it's naturally a multicolored spell, so it has Convoke. Not a perfect fit. Still a good fit. Let's see. It's most of the time it's add mana in any combination that pops up here. Not that many of like these types of cards. Painted Servant, by the way. I'm gonna pick up this card at some point, probably in the original artwork. It's one of my favorite Magic cards of all time. Especially the Shadowmoor printing. I don't know, it's so evocative for some reason. Let's scroll down and see if there's any good cards, but we might have to call it like just we might not find anything here. It's also insane card, by the way. Each spell you cast that's exactly 3 colors has replicate 3, which means you can pay 3 to copy it. It's very interesting. I was thinking of cards like during your upkeep. I mean, I want to talk about shift. During your upkeep, you may change the color of shift to any color or combination of colors. This card could potentially be good in different decks here than just Tam. I mean, it's not particularly good in Tam. But it's just such a fun card from Ice Age. Just randomly a mono blue color identity card that has every color if you wanted to. So that's pretty sick. I was thinking of, there is this white card. Is it a wedding? Is it a ceremony? Wait. No. After. There's probably a million cards called After. There's the white card that cares about you having every color among permanents you control. And I'm wondering what Scryfall tag that would have. Do you know the cards? It's like the wedding of... The set is Eldraine. So, set is Is that Eldraine? Eldraine? Is that Eldraine? EDR? Probably not. Eldraine. Yeah. Eldraine, and we're thinking of mana value 3 and color identity equals white. I was thinking of Happily Ever After. So, if there are 5 colors among permanents you control, that is a phrasing that we can look at. Colors among permanents you control. We probably found every card like that already. I'm not sure if we looked at that already, by the way. Colors among permanents. Of course, we need to go in here. Do it like this. Well, without the typo, maybe we'll find some examples. Yeah, there's the vivid cards, but let's only search for legal cards here. Return target permanent to its owner's hand if that permanent shares a color with the most common color. That's not particularly good. No, I think we found everything. Well, sometimes that's just as long as green's the most common color. What the hell? These old cards are so weird. Sometimes that's just how it is. For me, the big takeaway for Tem is that surprisingly, the sub-theme that we found, the obvious theme is you're changing colors, and Vivid is in the same set, so you're playing Vivid. To me, the surprising sub-theme is apparently having a lot of colors is super aggressively slanted. +1/+0 for each color, +1/+1 for each color, +5/+5, +2/+2, but it costs less, +2/+2 for each color. So maybe Tam is actually not that mindful, not that demure, but instead like a real, like, a real threat at the table. Which is fun. I like to imagine that, like, turn 1 you play Dragon Fire Blade, turn 2 you, whatever, you tap this and then equip Dragon Fire Blade for free. It's certainly interesting. Let's take a quick check. And oh, wait, maybe we already did. Yeah, people all just did the same thing, right? They just untap. Yeah, untap is pretty interesting. Domain, which I know is not the perfect fit. And then the color change, although I think there's better commanders for that. Marvin Murderer's Mimic is an interesting card because it's a 2-mana 2/2 that has the abilities of all creatures, the activated abilities of all creatures you control, which could potentially be interesting. But yeah, it seems like people are not getting much more creative than that. So I'm gonna pitch this to you as the surprisingly aggro 2-mana Simic commander. All right. Let's quickly recap. Then, I'm gonna end the stream, and as a reminder, tomorrow, probably gonna be streaming Slay Spire. I'll produce, if I have the time today, I'll produce a little video of like why I think that most Magic players will absolutely love Slay Spire if they don't already. I mean, the Venn diagram is has a pretty big overlap. But yeah, tomorrow might be Slay Spire because I'm so excited to finally get my hands on it, and it leaves early access tomorrow. Then, of course, we'll be back to Magic in no time. The plan will was and will always be to, at some point, transition to always have Magic first and then maybe stream something else later. For now, for some reason, my voice seems to be super untrained. And even if I'm healthy, which I'm not right now, I just lose my voice after 2.5 hours. That's gonna get better at some point for sure. But back on topic before we end the stream, as we usually do. We talked about today Nick Anziel, current conductor, a merfolk scout that cares about exploring and puts +1/+1 counters on it when you explore a non-land card, and when you explore a land card, it puts a land tapped into play. When you read land tapped into play, think of cards like Amulet of Vigor. When you read explore, play cards that say explore. We didn't go much deeper than that. I vouch for maybe including the Scouting Trek plus Cultivator Colossus combo, which devoted viewers probably know. Search a library for any number of basic lands, put them on top, and then Cultivator Colossus puts them all into play. We didn't go much deeper than that because really there wasn't that much explore support yet. Personally, I think we're going back to Ixalan sometime soon. And maybe a different set also. I heard that the Strixhaven set ventures outside the university, so maybe we'll even get some explore there. Next, a bit more interesting, Prime Speaker Vanafor. I think you can take her into kind of 2 different routes. First route is full-on combo, which is like play Vanafor, Untap Vanafor, sacrifice this guy that untapped her, get the next one that untaps her, sacrifices that guy, then go to 4, untap Vanafor, until you find a combo piece that just wins the game. We also used it to, again, reiterate how incredibly broken things are that have an ability to cheat them into play for cheap, even though they have higher mana value, because again, that works very nicely. Delve, Warp, Suspend. Or a card that you might not know, might not find quite as easily because it's not keyworded. You may remove 2 green cards from Allosaurus Rider, or from your hand to cast Allosaurus Rider. It's a 7-drop. That curves quite nicely into your Craterhoof Behemoth. For me, personal highlight that I would love for you guys to think about more often, Yadara, Grave Gardener. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, return it to the battlefield face down as a forest. So it ramps you. And the subset of creatures that just likes to die, Undying, Persist, or even cards like Yavimaya Elder that just do something when they die. Rashmi was nice as she kind of put together a lot of the things that we talked about previously. Whenever you cast your first spell, each turn, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it if it's cheaper than the thing you cast originally. If you don't, put it into your hand. So, a couple line of text that you dissect. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, comma, that's the first line of text. Whenever you cast your first spell each turn, that means you are playing stuff that is instant speed, or stuff that makes your stuff instant speed. You're also playing stuff that untaps your lands every turn. That's just how it is, and these cards that feature the same line of text whenever you cast your first spell. Reveal the top card of your library if it has any condition. Reveal the top card of your library and check condition means you're playing Brainstorm, it means you're playing Senses Divining Top, it means you're playing Scroll Wreck. Converted mana cost less than the spell you originally cast, that means you're playing all of these cheat cards. Force of Will, alternate casting cost, Warp, Delve, Logic Knots, all of these cards. Or also, Worldly Tutor goes into the same category as Brainstorm, Senses Divining Top, and so on and so forth. Cast it without paying its mana cost. This indicates that you can play cards like Ancestral Vision. As easy as that. If you don't put the reveal card into your hand, that's just a safety valve. This means you always draw a card even if it doesn't line up. And I wanted to highlight these older cards that have very weird alternate casting costs, like if you have a forest, you can have every player gain 6 life to cast this 4-mana sorcery for free. Then we talked about Tamio. Tamio is interesting because she flips. She's a 1-drop, interesting in and of itself. She flips into a Planeswalker, that's also pretty interesting. She cares about you drawing a bunch of cards, so you're playing Brainstorm and Brain Surge. She creates clues, so you think of cards like Inspiring Statuary. She produces artifacts, you think of Affinity of Artifacts. On the flip side, she returns instants and sorceries from your graveyard to your hand. To me, that always means I'm thinking extra turn spells. It could just be high-value spells like, Universal Surveillance, for example. And she's a Planeswalker, so you're thinking Proliferate. And then we just talked about Tom, so I'm not going to give an in-depth thing. Just the highlight for me. We realized that there's a bunch of cards that care about colors that make your creature stronger. So I expected this to be like a value control shell. It seems like it's super aggressively slanted for whatever reason. Next time, we are going to finish the research on Simic commanders, if my voice makes it through. It might be 2 streams, but we have ahead of us Taunos, who makes copies of things. This guy who cheats on its mana costs and cares about toughness. We have a mana value 5 or greater commander. We have a cloak commander. And a bunch of more interesting stuff, but we'll get to that when the time is ripe. I think that's a saying. In the meantime, I'm gonna end it after just 1 hour and 48 minutes once I'm done. I wish you just the most wonderful rest of your day. And always remember, be kind to yourself and others. Goodbye. See you potentially tomorrow.